Hello everyone. Today I, Harmeet Thakur, will be presenting different kind of laws along with my three teammates Ashpreet Kaur, Harjeet Singh and Shobit Kumar. Contract law refers to the set of legal rules and principles that govern the formation, performance and enforcement of agreements between parties. It is a branch of civil law that governs the right of obligation of parties who enter into legally binding agreements. Formation of a contract to be legally binding, it must be certain requirements. These include an offer and acceptance consideration, capacity to contract, and legality of purpose. An offer is a purpose made by one party to another. It must be specific, clear, and communicated to other party. Acceptance is the other party's agreement to the terms of offer. It must be communicated to offerer and unconditional. Performance of a contract. Once a contract is formed, the parties are obliged to perform their respective duties under the agreement. This includes fulfilling the promise made in the contract and complying with the terms of contract. If one party fails to perform their duties, the other party may be entitled to seek the damages or terminate the contract. Enforcement of a contract. If one party breaches the contract, the other party may seek legal remedies. These include seeking damages for any harm caused by the breach of seeking performance of the contract. Specific performance is a court order requiring the breaching party to perform their duties under the contract. This case represents a scenario in which two parties, Dev and Kiran, enter into a contract in which Dev promises them to name all the properties related to him to Kiran at the time of his death in exchange for Kiran's assistance in caring for him. However, Dev later breaches the contract by cutting Kiran out of the will. The case references the precedent set in Wackling versus Ripley, in which a similar contract was found to be legally binding. The case raises several important issues related to the contract law. Firstly, it highlights the importance of offer and acceptance in the formation of a contract. In this case, Dave made an offer to Karen by promising to name all the property related to him for her at the time of his death, and Karen accepted the offer by agreeing to assist him in caring for him. This indicates the valid contract was formed between the two parties. Karen provided consideration by agreeing to assist the wave in caring for him, and they provided consideration by promising to name all the property related to him at the time of his death. This case also highlights the capacity to contract. In this case, it is assumed that both Devi and Karid had the capacity to contract as they were legally capable to entering into the agreement. It is assumed that contract purpose is legal as it relates to transfer of property. Lastly, the case highlights the concept of breach of contract and the remedies available to non-breaching parties. They have breached cutting down the Karen out of the will, and Karen can legal remedies such as seeking damages, specific performance of the contract. In conclusion, this case illustrates the importance of offer and acceptance, consideration, capacity, legality of purpose, and how the court uses the case law as a reference in the decision making in contract law. This case represents a scenario in which Amadio gives a guarantee on behalf of their son to the Commercial Bank of Australia for a loan taken by the son's company. However, the bank cashes in the guarantee without the knowledge of the couple and the company is liquidated. The case reference of the precedent set in the Commercial Bank of Australia versus Amadio case, in which a similar situation occurred, and the court found that the corporation owned money due to the fraudulent conduct. The case raises several important issues related to the contract law. In this case, Amadio gave the guarantee on the behalf of the son to assume the responsibility of the loan taken by the son's company. Secondly, it also highlights the A-League bank cashed in the guarantee without the knowledge of the couple, and that the inclusion of Amadio in the contract was fraudulent. Thirdly, it also highlights the capacity to contract, which refers to the legal ability of the parties to enter to the contract. In this case, it is assumed that the Amadio couple had the capacity to contract as they were legally capable of binding into an agreement. In this case, it is assumed that contract purpose is legal as it relates to the loan taken by their son's company. Further, in this case, the bank is alleged to have a breach contract by cashing in the guarantee without the knowledge of the couple, and Amadio can seek legal remedies such as seeking damages or specific performance of the contract. In conclusion, the case illustrates the importance of guarantee, fraudulent capacity of the contract, legality of purpose, and how the contract uses law reference in decision-making contract law. It also highlights the remedies available for non-breaching parties in the event of a breach of contract. The case study also shows how influenced people might be without sufficient background knowledge of the industry being discussed and how to adapt the case in this case so they may be performed effectively.
Hello, my name is Shobit Kumar. In this case, they represent the scenario in which the NGN breach and contract and fails to fulfill their obligation. The case reference the president said in Hadley versus Bank style case, in which the court dislike of the influence and the mistake associated with the other party to the contract were considered. The case raises several important issues related to contract law. Firstly, it highlights the concept of a breach of contract, which occurs when one party fails to carry out their obligation under the contract. In this case, NG is alleged to have breached the contract by failing to fulfill their obligation. Secondly, the case illustrates the concept of the consequence of breach contract, which can have a serious implication for the completed job and the parties involved. In this case, it is alleged that the breach of contract has led in the lost earning of the bread and Jenny. Thirdly, the case highlights the importance of Australian contract Act, which governs the right and obligation of party in contract. The case reflects the act and likely impact of contract breach on one party involved. Fourthly, the case illustrates the concept of the plaintiff and the defendant in contract dispute, where the plaintiff is the party that has been harmed by the breach of contract. He also mentioned that in this case, Brad and Jenny are the plaintiff and NG is the defendant. Lastly, the case highlights the concept of negligence and willful breach of contract. In this case, the court will rule the whether or not NG negligence contributed. In conclusion, this case illustrates the concept of breach contract, the consequence of the breach contract, the Australian and the wood of the contract. The case also demonstrates that the court uses the case law as a reference in decision-making contract. In this case, it is also known as a breach of contract and can have a serious consequence for the complete job. In this case, also a scenario in which a passenger Dalian demand a full refund of the money as he occurred. In this case, also reference the present set in the Batalic COB Dalwin 1993, in which the case occurred. In which case, also mention the aside for on-board entertainments. This case raises several important issues related to the contract law. Firstly, it highlights the concept of distraction, and secondly, it highlights the case of the concept of the influence of the outcome, which is the proper consequence that is connected to the better influence has been outcome. Thirdly, it also mentions the case of highlight importance of the city and CC's influence that has been made regarding the outcome in the case citizens or the Batali ship company 1993 cause was the used reference for the help user to understand the result relevance. Fourthly, he also illustrated the concept of negligence in which refer to the failure exercise reasonable care and causing the harm or loss another party. Lastly, he sum up the saying that the highlight the concept of remedies available in the non-party breaching. In this the case Dalian event and seeking full refund of the money, but the judge ruled out the money portion, his money that should be repaid amount set aside for on-board entertainment. In conclusion, the case also demonstrates that the court uses the cases law and reference decision-making contract law. In this present scenario, once more the understand the result relevance and uses the steer. The case highlight the nature of the work being played. He also known the Jenkins and Pico cutter dose in this case, which deal with the proper reference that has to be made for the offer has been good outlook. This case also shown that should be made for the offer that has been selected as an invitation of the good outlook, and that the information collection should be related to the outlook that has been selected. In this case, they also reference the influence that has been made for regarding decision in favor of the outlook that has been selected due to the false representation by the OD company and the false representation of the facts. This case also represents that there is no false representation of the fact in the influence regarding the work that has been caused concerning work. In conclusion, the case illustrates the importance of proper reference and the other being selected in intention and a good outlook and the need to ensure the information collected to outlook. And he also mentioned that there might be a proper punishment in this case for the work that has been made regarding the same.
Hey, my name is Harjeet Singh. Tort law is branch of civil law that deals with situation in which one party causes harm or injury to another party, resulting in legal liability. Torts are civil wrongs that occur when one person harms another person, their property or their reputation. The purpose of tort law is to provide a remedy for the harm caused and compensate the victim for their losses. There are several types of torts, including intentional torts, negligent torts, and strict liability torts. Intentional torts occur when one person intentionally causes harm to another person. Example of intentional torts include assault, battery, and defamation. Negligent torts occur when one person fails to exercise reasonable care to causes harm to another person. Example of negligent torts include car accidents, slip and fall accidents. And medical malpractice. Strict liability torts occur when one person is held liable for harm caused by an activity, regardless of whether they were negligent or intentional in causing the harm. The example of strict liability torts include product liability and animal attacks. Tort law also includes the concept of vicarious liability, which holds an employer liable for the action of their employees. For example, if any employee of a company causes harm while on the job, the employer may be held liable for the harm caused. Cause illustrate a scenario in which customer Jean was injured while shopping at a supermarket. There, the case references the Australian law of the Tortious Act, which governs the conduct of business and liability for harm caused by a breach of duty care. The store has a duty of care to its customers to ensure their safety while shopping. The case argues that the store failed to meet this duty of care by not regularly check and maintaining the store, which led to Jean's injury. Furthermore, the case argues that the Jean entitled to compensation for their injuries, as they have suffered damages as a result of the store negligence. The store can be held liable for the damages caused and can be required to pay for the medical expenses and lost wages. Overall, the case highlights the importance of duty of care, the liability of businesses for harm caused to customers as a result of their negligence. It also emphasizes the need for proper maintenance, supervision, and training to ensure the safety of customers.
Yeah, Ashpreet, this scenario presents an instance of the Tetra law where Lan has filed a case against Johnny for the damages caused to his abandoned park outside of the garage, which was under the care of the Johnny. The law of the Tetra's conduct in Australia suggests that there is a ability for any damage caused due to the failure to exercise reasonable care. In this case, it can be argued that the Johnny had breached the duty of care that he owned the land by not properly ensuring the safety of the parked vehicle outside the garage. The case also highlights the concept of the compensation where land can claim the damages caused due to the van and seek remunerations for the same. However, it is also mentioned that will not be any compensation if it is found to lane has been elected in this action. This is important aspect of the Tetra law where the liability is responsible for compensating the aggressive party for any damages caused. The scenario also mentioned that the influence of the perspective chosen in this case and how has to be affected the outcome of the case. It is important to note that the reference used in this case is a hypothetical and does not cite any specific case law. Additionally, the language and organization of the text is confusing and lacks coherence, make it difficult to understand the arguments being presented. Overall, the case scenario presents a general overview of the total law and its principle, but it lacks specific detail and credible reasons to support and claim being made. A scenario where the poly has filed a complaint against Sam for a breach of contract and total moral damages. The reference used in the case of the Dobbingans versus a Stevenson 1932 case, which is known as a case filed of the total law that deals with the duty of the care and negligence. The case highlights the concept of the duty of the care, which references to the obligation to the reasonable steps to prevent harm or injury to others. In this scenario, it is suggested that the same as the duty to care to ensure that the product he sells and a safe compensation and has to be a fail to exercise this duty care result in poly suffering harm or injury. Additionally, the case also touches on the concept of the moral damages, which refers to the emotional or psychological harm suffered by an individual as a result of the wrongful act. The case also mentioned that the possibility of the valid claim for the reimbursement and a compensation for the breach of the contract and the total moral damages. This suggests that the poly has enlightened to financial compensation for the harm and injury she has suffered. Overall, the case highlights the importance of the duty of the care and the legal recognition of the feeling exercise this duty is clear. It also highlights the potential for the moral damages and a possibility of financial compensation for a such harm. However, it is important to note that the case provides is or not a real case and is not a clear. Overall, the above case illustrates the concept of the contract and total law in the Australian legal system. A breach of the contract occurs when one party fails to fulfill their obligation and outside the contract, which is to be a severe wrong result in a harm injury to any party. The case presents such as a Halo versus the Valentinian Jinx, which was a cutter dog in a demonstration how these concepts are applied in real world situation and potential consequences for the party involved. Additionally, the case also highlights the concept of negligence, which refers to the failure to exercise reasonable care and causing harm or injury on another party. Use of the case law references such as Baltic Shipping, Cole, Daniels, Faza, Denison versus the Stevenson utilized to provide a construct understanding how the legal principles are applied in the practice. Overall, it is important to understand that the implication and responsibilities of both contract and tort law in order to navigate the resolve disputes
Thank you so
within the
much.
legal system. Thank you.